There is something about gas stations at night that never felt safe to me. Not the hum of the fluorescent lights. Not the way the parking lot always seems half-lit. Not the empty stretch of road that disappears into the dark on both sides. Just a feeling, like standing in a place the world forgot to watch. I have driven past hundreds of them without stopping. The one time I did, at a highway exit somewhere between where I started and where I was supposed to be, I met a little boy who changed everything I thought I understood about being in the wrong place at the wrong time. This was about 3 years ago, and I still replay every single second of it. It was late October. I had been driving for almost 4 hours along a stretch of highway that cuts through the rural part of the state. That type of road where cell service drops in and out, and the exits are spaced so far apart you start rationing your gas like it is water in a desert. The needle had dipped below a quarter tank. So I pulled into one of the gas stations I identified on Google Maps before I started my trip. One of those old standalone stations with 2 pumps and a small convenience store attached. The place looked like it was built in 1987 and never quite updated. One of the outdoor lights above the second pump was flickering. The other one had gone out entirely. I parked at the working pump. It was close to 11 p.m. There were no other cars. Not at the pumps. Not in the lot. Not on the road coming in. I remember thinking how strange that was. A gas station sitting completely empty on a Friday night, lit up like it was open for business, but feeling more abandoned than anything else. The kind of stillness that doesn't feel like peace. I swiped my card, started the pump, and leaned against the side of my car. Hands in my pockets, eyes low. I suddenly heard footsteps on the pavement. I turned around, and there was a boy standing about 15 feet from me. He couldn't have been more than 8 years old, 9 at the most. He was wearing a light jacket, thin, the kind you wouldn't choose for a cold October night, and sneakers that were dirty in a way that suggested he had been walking for a while. He had no backpack, no phone, no adult anywhere near him. He was just standing there, watching me. I looked around the lot, behind the pumps, toward the road. No one else in sight. I asked him if he was okay. He said he was lost, that he had been there with his parents, but they had gotten separated somehow. His voice was flat in a way that didn't match the words, like this boy was not scared or crying. Just delivering the information, like he had said it before and was saying it again. He pointed toward the side of the building, the side that faced away from the road and away from the light. He said he thought his parents might be back there waiting. I looked at where he was pointing. There was no light on that side of the building, just a concrete wall and a dumpster and a dark gap between the building and something I couldn't see from where I was standing. Something in me went cold and quiet. I told him I would help him find his parents, but that we should go inside the store together, where there was light and a phone, and the employee could call someone. The boy looked at me for a long moment without saying anything. Then he said his parents were not inside. He said they were around back. He said it again, around back, with a slight emphasis, like I hadn't been listening the first time. I told him again that we should go inside, that the person working could help us figure it out, that it was safer. He didn't move toward the store, didn't nod at what I said, didn't even look relieved. He just stood there, and something about the way he was watching me, completely still, no fidgeting, no tears, no urgency, started to feel deeply, disturbingly wrong. An 8-year-old who is genuinely lost at a gas station at 11 p.m. is not calm. They are not still. They don't stare at you with dry eyes and a flat voice and repeat the same instruction twice. I took a step toward the store entrance and said, "Come on, let's go inside together." And that's when his face changed. It wasn't anger exactly. It was something colder than anger. His expression went tight and hard in a way that didn't belong on a child's face. He stared at me for 3 full seconds, long enough that I felt the weight of it, and then he turned and ran. Not toward the road, not toward the convenience store. He ran around the back of the building and disappeared into the dark. I didn't follow him. I finished pumping my gas. I didn't take my eyes off the side of that building for a single second. The entire lot felt different now, heavier, watched. Every shadow between the pumps seemed to have depth that it didn't have before. I pulled the nozzle out, capped my tank, and walked directly into the store. The man behind the counter was wearing a cap pulled low. He immediately looked up when I came in. I told him what happened. I described the boy, where he had been standing, what he had said, which direction he ran. The man told me that was not the first time. He said that over the past several weeks, there had been 3 incidents at that same exit. 2 at his station, 1 at the next one down the road. In each case, someone had been approached by a child, alone at night, asking for help finding their parents. In each case, the child tried to lead the person toward the side or the back of the building, away from the lights and away from visibility from the road. In one of those cases, someone followed. He didn't tell me everything that happened to that person. What he did tell me was that they hadn't gone willingly the rest of the way. There had been adults waiting, and the child, when that person fought back and ran for the road, had disappeared with them. The employees had reported it. The police had driven by a few extra times, but no arrests had been made. No one had been identified. He looked at me and said, "You made the right call, going inside, not following him around back." I drove the rest of the way home without stopping. 3 days after I got home, I pulled up the gas station on Google Maps. I wanted to note the exit number, so I could avoid it going forward. I glanced at the satellite view, saw the lot, wrote down the exit number, closed the app and moved on. It wasn't until 2 days after that, I was telling my friend about the encounter and showing her the image, that she pointed out a detail in the image that made everything 10 times more terrifying. On the side of the building, the dark side, the side the boy had been pointing toward, a van pulled right up against the back wall, partially hidden by the dumpster. The driver's side door not fully closed. It had been there in the image the whole time. I just hadn't been looking. I couldn't make out the plates. The image wasn't sharp enough for that. But I could see the body style clearly enough, a dark van, older model, and I could see that the driver's side door wasn't fully closed. It suddenly dawned on me that while I was standing 20 feet away, refilling my tank, someone might have already been back there, parked in the dark, door cracked open, waiting. After about a week, I called the station. I don't know exactly what I expected. Maybe I just needed to tell someone who already knew the context, someone who wouldn't look at me like I was overreacting. The man who answered was not the same employee from that night, but when I asked if the older guy with the cap was working, he said that man hadn't been in for about 4 days. I asked if he was sick. He said he didn't know, just that he had stopped showing up. I left my number and asked if someone could have him call me when he came back in. The guy on the phone said sure, no problem, in a tone that made it clear he had already moved on from the conversation. That call never came. I tried twice more over the following month. The second time, someone told me the man I was asking about no longer worked there. The third time, no one picked up at all. I checked the local news for that area over the next few months. There was one small item, easy to miss, buried in a regional roundup, about an ongoing investigation into a series of incidents at highway rest stops and gas stations along that corridor. There were no names or details. Just a note that the sheriff's department was looking into reports from multiple locations. It was 3 sentences long, and then nothing. I never found out who the boy was. I never found out who was waiting behind that building. I don't know if that person who followed, the one the employee mentioned, ever fully recovered from whatever happened to them. I never found a name, a face, a case file I could point to and say, there it is. What I have is a thread that goes somewhere dark and then just stops. What I think about now, what actually stayed with me past the fear, is this. That boy was somebody's child once, before whatever happened to him happened. Before someone decided he was useful as a tool rather than a person. There is a horror in that runs deeper than anything that could have happened to me at that gas station. The cruelty that turns a child into an instrument. I don't know how to resolve that. I'm not sure it can be resolved. Some things don't close. They just stay open. And you learn to move through the world with that opening in you, a little more aware than you were before. If you are ever at a gas station late at night and something feels wrong, trust that feeling. It exists for a reason. You do not owe anyone a reason to walk away. I went on a quick trip from Orange County to San Francisco to drop off my cousin who was moving there. On our way back, we made frequent stops. I usually hesitate to use gas station restrooms because so many people use them. You never know the people that use them, what they can carry, what they do in there, who can possibly be in there. Gas station restrooms aren't regularly supervised. We had stopped at a Shell gas station at 3 a.m. in Bakersfield to pump gas. I intended to use the restroom because I could no longer hold it in. There was a sign on the door that said it was closed for 30 minutes, so we waited. The clerk finally opened the door, and my aunt went in to pay. The clerk yells at my aunt, "Can't you see I'm trying to do my job?" My aunt quickly replies with the same attitude he gave her, "Well, why the fuck did you open the door if you don't intend to assist anyone?" "Well, you people keep tugging on the closed doors," he said. My aunt cussed him out, then stormed out. She let other customers know to not even bother going in there because he's pissed and he's not turning the gas pumps on for use. We decided to go to another gas station because we still needed gas. We found a Chevron 12 minutes away. It was 24 hours, so we were sure that we'd be able to get gas there. On arriving, I rushed out of the car to use the restroom. Little did I know what was coming for me. I usually go to the restroom accompanied by someone, especially gas station bathrooms. I had to go so bad I didn't ask my aunt to come with me. I walked in and went straight towards the restroom signs. I opened the door to a woman in a black jacket with messy hair, bloodshot eyes, and dark eye circles. She was just standing there as if she was waiting for someone to come in. I let out a gasp and quickly apologized. "Oh my God, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to." She just stood there staring at me without saying any words, with a creepy look on her face. I felt a bit uneasy. I went into a stall and proceeded to do my business. I heard the woman open the door and walk out. Shortly after, I heard groaning and moaning from 2 stalls down. I wondered if it was the woman, but I heard her leave, so it couldn't be her. Someone else must have been there before I went in. The noises that were coming from there made me a bit uncomfortable. I just wanted to quickly get out. The noises just kept going and wouldn't stop. As soon as I flushed the toilet, the woman stopped making noises. It was so uncomfortably quiet. I heard the woman in the stall unlock the door and rush out of the stall. I felt weird about walking out of the stall, but I had to wash my hands and make my way back to the car. When I opened the stall door, the same woman who was standing by the door when I initially walked in was now standing in front of my stall door. I froze and didn't know what to do. She was just standing there staring at me. We made eye contact for about 10 seconds. I thought about going back in the stall door and closing it. I just walked around her and went to wash my hands. She stood in the same position the whole time I was washing my hands. As soon as I was going to dry my hands, she aggressively turned around to face me. In the creepiest tone, she says, "Did you think I was a man when you walked in? Were you scared? Why are you scared? Don't be scared. Have you tasted skin before?" I ran out of the restroom and sprinted towards the car. My aunt had a concerned look on her face and asked if everything was okay. As soon as I was going to tell her what had just happened, I saw the woman walking out of the building. I was so scared that I couldn't move. I was completely frozen. My aunt turned around to see what I was staring at. She felt uneasy about the situation because I wasn't saying a word. I watched this woman walk to the empty red rusty car next to us and go into the passenger seat. She slowly turned to where I was. At this point, she was staring right at me. She was barely blinking. My aunt told me to get into the car, and we drove away. The woman was still staring at me as we drove off. When we finally drove a few miles away from the gas station, I felt as if I could breathe again. I don't know what would have happened if I had stayed in that restroom any longer. All I know is that I will no longer use the gas station restroom alone ever again. If these stories are creeping you out, subscribe. The horror isn't over. There are places you remember for the right reasons, and then there are places that follow you home. I still can't drive past a gas station at night without scanning the lot, without counting the cars, without watching the shadows between the pumps to see if anything in them is watching back. This happened last year, and I've never, not once, talked about all of it, not the full story. It was late October, a Thursday. I remember that because I had just worked a double shift, 11 hours on my feet, and I was running on fumes. Not just the car, me too. I was driving home along Route 9. If you've never been out that way after midnight, it's the kind of road where the tree line swallows both shoulders and the painted center line goes gray from age. The kind of road where you realize, a little too late, that you haven't seen another pair of headlights in a long time. The fuel light had been on for about 20 miles. I kept telling myself I'd make it. I kept being wrong. When I finally saw lights ahead, that orange glow of a gas station canopy in the dark, I actually let out a breath. Relief. Real relief. I pulled in and looked around. The lot was almost empty. One car, an old model sedan, dark-colored, was parked along the far edge of the property. Not at a pump. Just parked, facing the road. Engine off. No one visible inside. I gave it maybe 2 seconds of attention. Just a car. Probably someone stretching or making a call. I pulled up to pump 4. The station itself, a small building, one of those older ones with a single fluorescent tube buzzing inside, sat about 50 feet away. I could see the light through the window. I could see a figure behind the counter. Good. Someone was there. I swiped my card. The pump beeped, clicked, and the screen lit up. Everything normal. I grabbed the handle, selected regular, and started filling the tank. Here's where things started to feel off. Not dramatically like a movie, just a low, creeping wrongness that I couldn't name right away. The pump was slow. The gallons were ticking up in a way that felt slightly wrong, like the numbers were lagging. I figured it was an old machine and let it go. What I didn't let go was the car across the lot, because at some point while I was standing there, I glanced over and realized the angle had changed. It was pointing at me now, or maybe it had always been pointing at me and I hadn't noticed. I watched it for a full 30 seconds. Nothing moved. No exhaust rising from the tailpipe. No glow from a phone. Just a car in the dark facing me. I looked away, told myself to stop. When the tank clicked full, I pulled the handle free and hung it back on the pump. As I pulled my keys from my pocket, I noticed the numbers on the screen were still climbing. $72, $74, $77, ticking upward, slow and steady like a heartbeat. The nozzle was back on the pump. I hadn't been holding it. The gas had stopped flowing. I could see that. But the meter kept running. I pressed cancel. Nothing. I pressed it again, harder. Still nothing. The screen didn't even flicker. Just kept counting. $91. $94. My card was already charged. My phone had buzzed in my pocket with the transaction alert the second I swiped. $72 and change. The number I had watched tick up from 0 to full. But now the machine was still running, still billing something, and there was no way to make it stop. I walked toward the building. Fast. The fluorescent light was still on inside. But the figure I had seen behind the counter was gone. I pushed on the door. Locked. The kind with a small deadbolt that you can see through the glass. I knocked. Nothing. No movement or voice from inside. I knocked again louder. Pressed my face against the glass. The counter was empty. A coffee cup sat on the corner of the counter, steam still rising from it. The cashier had been there minutes ago. The coffee was still hot. And now nobody was there. I turned back toward my car, and that's when I registered the sound. Footsteps, coming from the right side of the building, the side I hadn't been looking at. A man stepped out of the shadow between the building and the fence line. He was tall, older, and wearing a dark jacket with the collar up. He walked at an even pace. No urgency. No surprise. He stopped about 8 feet away from me, and he said, quietly, calmly, like he was telling me the weather, "You'll need to pay again if you want to leave." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't move toward me. He just stood there in the half-dark with his hands loose at his sides, watching me the way you watch something you already own. My keys were already in my hand. I had done that automatically, the second I'd started walking toward the building, fingers through the ring, the key itself pressed against my palm. I don't even remember deciding to do it. I looked at him. I looked at my car, close, maybe 30 feet. And I looked at the dark sedan across the lot, and suddenly realized it was parked in the perfect spot to block the entrance if it moved forward. I said nothing. I walked to my car. Every part of me was waiting for the sound of him moving, but I heard nothing. I got in, started the engine in one motion, and pulled out of that lot at a speed that should have gotten me a ticket. I didn't look in the rear view until I had a mile behind me. There were no headlights following, no motion I could see. I called 911 from the road, gave them the location, told them what happened, told them the man was still there. Officers responded. When they arrived, the station was closed and locked. And I only learned that during a follow-up call the next day. No man, no dark sedan. The lot was empty. Here is what I found out, not from the police, but from a gas station worker I ended up speaking to months later, a woman who serviced equipment in that area. There had been a string of incidents along rural routes in that region over the prior 18 months. Pump tampering. Someone had gotten access to the internal billing software on older pump models, the kind that run outdated firmware, the kind that most independent gas stations can't afford to update, and modified them to continue running charges after the transaction ended. But the skimming and the overcharging were only part of it. The pumps had been wired to also lock the exit gate, if the station had one, or to trigger a secondary override that disabled the vehicle's ignition signal. A device installed in the pump housing, broadcasting on a specific frequency. If your car was close enough to the pump when the sequence activated, the car would not start. They would trap you there, confuse you, send someone out to collect, cash only, untraceable, before they'd let the override release. The only reason my car started was because I had walked away from the pump. I had put distance between myself and the device, far enough that the signal couldn't hold. If I'd stayed at that pump, if I'd kept pressing cancel or wasting time with that machine, my car wouldn't have started when I reached it. I keep coming back to how ordinary it all looked. How normal. A gas station off a two-lane road, a lit canopy, a pump, the kind of stop you make 100 times in your life without thinking twice. I've thought about that a lot. I've thought about what would have happened if it had been 40 degrees colder, if my phone had been dead. But more than any of that, I've thought about the cashier, the one who was there when I pulled in, the one who vanished before I reached the door, the one whose coffee was still steaming on the counter. I've tried to build a reasonable explanation, a back door, a smoke break, a family emergency that sent them out before I reached the window. I've told myself all of it. None of it fits, because a person leaving in a hurry doesn't stop to lock the deadbolt from the outside. And a person stepping out for 5 minutes doesn't just disappear when police arrive 20 minutes later. The officer who called said they found the station locked, no one on the premises. The owner, when contacted, claimed the station had been closed since 9 p.m. But I pulled in after midnight, and there was a person behind that counter. Both of those things disturb me in ways I can't fully articulate. I haven't been back to that station. I never will be. If you made it to the end, subscribe and turn on notifications. Some stories only find the people who are still here.